Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order this Manvel City Council workshop at 5 p.m. And on the workshop, we have a few items, but we're first going to convene into executive session. And then when we come out of executive session, we have the budget discussion that is on the workshop with whatever time's remaining. If we can try to leave 15 to 20 minutes remaining to talk through the budget, that'd be great. So I'm going to read the executive session. We'll step into it. City Council will convene into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, Personnel Matters, to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, and duties of a public officer or employee, city manager search. And so we will convene into that at 5:01 p.m. I hope everyone had a great and restful Labor Day as well. Welcome back to a short week. So, all right, let's go. p.m., having taken no action. We will now move on and utilize the rest of our workshop time to talk about the proposed budget. So, Dan, what I'd like to do is turn it over to you. If you can kind of give us an update if anything's changed. I know there's been some action by SMDA. And then Councilman Perry, I'd like to see, I'm glad you and your family are feeling better. And I'd like to see if you have anything that you would like to weigh in on as you missed the last meeting. So, Dan, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So you're right. SMDA did have a very productive meeting last week. That's let me make sure I get it right. The South Manvel Development Authority. So that's the spending part of the TERS, right? So they had 10 action items on their agenda last week, and ordinarily they have 1 or 2, and that's to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So they had lots of action, and the biggest things that Rosie and I got out of that was the board voted to go ahead and let the city transfer some of those funds back over to the city. That the agreement very clearly identifies that the city is supposed to get our clawback first, our cost of service first. So Rosie had done a good job in estimating those costs. So she already had the right numbers in the budget for next year, which was $360,000 or so for next year, plus a $60,000 admin fee for next year. But we also got sort of a reconciliation of $476,000 to kind of catch up from previous years of clawback, plus $100,000 for previous years of administrative catch-up. So if you add up all 4 of those numbers, it's just under $1 million, $999,145. So I wish I could tell you that was $1 million that we weren't planning on. We were planning on 400 of it or so. So it's a little bit more in this year's budget. So what that does is that sort of combats the $800,000 is what was already being used this year for fund balance. So it kind of buys back into that a little bit, if you will. So good news, really, from SMDA, and they also agreed again. So the $60,000 will be an annual from recurring. We talked about this won't happen again, where we have to reconcile. We'll do this on an annual basis. We'll be able to claw back. They're going to have internal auditors and everything that they've worked with different consultants. So it is up and running officially. So.
And Dan, just a question on
Sure.
that. And I know we have one of our SMDA members here. I appreciate y'all's work on that. That just under $1 million, that's going to technically be recognized over 2 budgets. We can recognize
Correct.
about half of it now, and then half of it in next year's
Roughly.
budget.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
Does council have any questions about that?
So to clarify that we're going to be able to pull about 500 this year?
About 576 into this year's budget. So this year, the budget already identified $500,000 in last year's approved budget, plus the 300 for the budget transfer a couple of months ago. So that was 800. So now this 576 eats back into that of how much we have to transfer over from fund balance. So next year is what we had already presented to you when we submitted the last draft budget, but it helps for this year's budget.
And Dan, so where does that leave us to have a balanced budget? How much would we, with the current budget as it's presented, current tax rate of 56 cents, what would need to be pulled from the unused fund balance in order to have a balanced budget?
Rosie, do we have that number handy by chance? No, but we're trying to work on that because so that's one component, and then dependent coverage. Now that we're just about done with all of those numbers, so we'll know for sure. What we want to do is get an updated budget to y'all next week, so that you can have the whole week basically to look over it. But it helps. It certainly helps.
Because I think the good thing about the decision council that we made at the last meeting was employees can now opt in to having their dependents on the health plan. So we'll know what the actual number is at. We projected what the number would be, but it's most likely going to come below what the projection was because we're going to have the hard facts. Any other changes, Dan, within the budget from last meeting to this meeting?
I don't believe so. No, those are the main two, Mayor.
Appreciate that update.
Sure.
Councilman Perry, at the last meeting, we talked about dependent health coverage, market-based increases, performance increases. We talked about the dependent health coverage, just a few other items. Do you have any comments or anything that you'd like to add?
Of course, I want to at least have a lingering shadow of my voice over a couple of things. And I did review the information that was put out. So obviously, to me, a great concern was making sure that we would be able to implement this dependent health coverage. Another concern is that we would be able to get our police force to where they should be as far as salaries. But I do, and of course, I don't want us ever to be in a place where we have to look at cutting city services or laying off staff, because of budgetary restraints. But I do want to be careful about becoming too comfortable with visiting that unused fund balance or setting our current tax rate so low that we're going to be inhibited when we go into the next tax year. We know that the Texas legislator is already putting quite a few restrictions. So I just want us to be careful, when we're looking at how low we're going to go, because it's going to impact us as to what we have available for next year for a tax rate.
For sure. And if I could add, so it's looking like our next council workshop, Chief, we're going to be able to have a presentation, hopefully from CORE, to talk about the police station?
That's correct.
Yep. So this is also an exciting time for those that, weren't on this trek almost 2 years ago, I guess, or it was 3 years ago.
It feels like it's been an eternity, but I've been working on it 3, but we actually, it's been actually a 2-year process.
2 years, yeah. So the reason I bring that up is things don't tend to get cheaper as time goes on. So they're working on a guaranteed maximum price for the police station. It is quite likely that we're going to need to assist, even though we went out for a bond, it's quite likely that we're going to need to use some of that fund balance to help pay for equipment and furniture and fixtures and all that kind of good stuff. So we're going to find out hopefully next week, but I hate to say we're all going to find out together, but we've sent them back to the drawing board one more time to sharpen their pencils and make sure that we're getting, the best foot forward. But to your point, not only do we suspect that we're going to need that fund balance for other things, I would almost argue that we know that we're going to.
Yeah.
So you're right on track.
And of course, I don't want to always harp on our Standard & Poor's rating, but it is important to me because we know that with some of the capital projects that we have to fund, there's always that possibility of having to go out for debt, and keeping that rating as high as we can could be the difference between hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars that we could save the city. So I'll stop beating that dead horse.
Well, I appreciate that, Councilman and Dan. Do any other council members have any comments or questions regarding the budget as it stands right now?
I just want to agree with Ed over here. He feels like he's harping on the same thing all the time, but no, I agree with you 100%. It's very important of all the things you just said. So.
Thank you, Councilman. So kind of the timeline moving forward, y'all, we have a public hearing tonight regarding the budget. We also have an agenda item where we will set the date to vote on the budget and the tax rate. If something happens between now and then, Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, and for whatever reason we decide that we're not ready to vote on it on the 18th, we could delay it if we need to. But tonight we'll be able to set the date of the 18th for potential adoption for both. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, so tonight, the only thing you're taking action on is just for the budget. The tax rate's already set. That schedule is set for the 18th. Should you not be ready to adopt it on the 18th, my suggestion would be a special meeting on that Friday, because then the last possible day that you guys get adopted is going to be the following Monday, the 25th. So if you don't do it on the 18th, you can meet on that Friday. If you don't do it that Friday, then you can meet again that following Monday. After that, even though you have technically till the 30th, you really only have 7 days after the date of the public hearing. So your public hearing is on the 18th, you have 7 days after that, and it's got to be adopted.
I appreciate that, Tammy. And then at our next meeting is when we'll have the public hearing regarding the tax rate as well. And so if you guys can reach out to the community and encourage them to come and to speak one way or another. And then I know Councilman Hudson, you have something to say. I was listening to, if you guys didn't know, there's a big happening right now in Austin. And one of the speakers at this event in Austin brought a quote from President Abraham Lincoln. And the quote says, "Nearly all men and women can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." So going into our meeting on the 18th, we have the power before us to adopt a budget and a tax rate that raises taxes on our citizens. And that's an important decision to make, because not only does this set what we're going to do for the next year, but for years to come as well. And so I've made my position very firm. I don't want to see taxes raised on our citizens. But I ask that as a body, we take time to contemplate over these next 2 weeks the decision before us. We do some soul searching. We talk with the community as well. And whatever way the votes lie, whatever amendments might be offered, whatever the path is, I believe that we're all up here to work together to implement whatever budget and tax rate is adopted. So I thought that was a very timely quote that I heard today that I wanted to make sure to share tonight. But Councilman Hudson, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yes, sir. I believe that we'll have a workshop on the 18th, and then we'll also, for those agenda items, we'll have time to discuss. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to publicly say this. It's one thing to go on social media and express your opinions, but they don't carry weight unless you show up to the meeting or you email or contact us. Social media, for me, is a great platform to share information, important information, but I see too much unprofessionalism in our citizens getting in debates that carry zero weight. So if you are concerned and you want us to vote to not raise the rate, come, do the work, call us, email us. We are all available. We want to hear from our citizens. We want to hear from those that are for and those that are against. Our mayor and city manager put on an amazing budget town hall. We had very few in attendance. And so I'm just taking the time to state that don't let this pass. We've been discussing the budget for 2 months now. Everyone has had the opportunity to voice their concerns. The votes will be taken, and we want to hear from you. This is our last plea to speak up, email, give us a call. Do not tag me on social media. Please call me. I love personal conversations. Just wanted to put that out there because I love our city and our citizens.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate that. And just as a procedural thing, so you need a supermajority in order to pass the budget and the tax rate. Is that correct, Bobby?
It's both and the tax rate. If you're going on
Okay.
no new revenue rate.
It's for the tax rate, okay. So we vote on the budget before we vote on the tax rate. So it's a little bit unique. You encumber the city with a budget before you necessarily have voted on the funds to do it, which is a weird thing from Austin that they require. But just keep that in mind when we go through the vote, that will have to occur. You have something, Councilman?
Councilman Perry made a point that I'm not really privy to understanding, but it's, maybe we need to clarify. So if we adopted a lower rate, is there a possibility that that's going to chop our fingers off down the road? Is there something that could limit us next year, year after, whatever, because of the rate we have adopted?
Yes, sir, it would limit it because once you lower it, it's hard to increase it again now because of it requires a voting for it. So if we're growing and we don't have enough space to increase the rate because of course we lowered it too low, we have to go out to the citizens to come in and vote for an increase. And since we're in a very large increase in what's going on in the city, we're increasing, we're getting bigger, you're limiting that increase there. Because if you go down to the 51 cents per se, next year you're locked into that 51 cent and it only gives you a certain amount, a small range to be able to vote on.
So
So
as
it
an
does impact it for next year.
Yeah, and that's the risk, Councilman and Rosie, to give an example. Let's say we went down to 51 cents. I mean, they could come back, the county and the state could come back and say that, the highest you can go without going to the voters for approval would then be 53 cents. So as you drop your rate, your ability, your cap is then subsequently lower. Right now, Manvel has the pleasure of being a fast-growing city that we can leverage the growth and permits and fees and the new sales tax that's coming in. But eventually, at some point, we're going to be like the city of Pearland, where it starts to plateau from a growth standpoint, where you only have the infill, and the lower that your rate is at that point means that you might be in some tough decisions to make from an infrastructure standpoint, because the cost of infrastructure doesn't get cheaper over time. So it's a balance of how do you not burden the taxpayers, at the same point in time, how do you set yourself up in the future as well. But Councilman Oplager, and then we'll wrap up the workshop.
I'm sorry. So here's my thoughts on the discussion. What we're talking about is taking the 52 cents, but that's taking the money out of the fund balance. All right? We're just playing a shell game. You're not cutting government. You're not cutting the size of government. If you want to do that, tell them to go back and start drawing a line through things, right? To take the money out of our savings account, because look, I promise you the roads around here are going to be in dire straits here real soon. Right? The asphalt roads are already in trouble. We don't have enough money budgeted for the repairs of our roads. So I just believe that if you drop it down to the 51, 52 cents, we're just taking the money out of the fund balance, and then echo Councilman Perry on the credit rating, because I think we're going to have bigger things ahead. Right? So I don't want to play a shell game saying, yeah, we saved you taxes, but on the backside, we just took money out of the savings account, and then we don't know what's going to be the problem down the road, and then have to pull out of that again. So that if we're going to talk serious, if we're really going to say I want to save you money, get the red pencil out and the ruler, and come back with 51 cents. That's cutting government. That's cutting the budget. That's where I feel about that, right? I mean, because they gave us some 56 cents, they gave us a budget, we still got to pull some money out of the fund balance from that, just to get to that. Then we tell the people, Manvel say, well, we saved you money, but we cut services. That's where I stand on that.
And I want to make sure that I'm clear to the council and to the citizens. I really do care about the city and the citizens, and any way that we could save, I would want to do it. But I think that we have responsibilities as elected leaders to have a visionary view for not just, this year's gratification or immediate gratification, but how it's going to impact us for the years coming, and even the councils that may come behind us. That's my only thinking.
Well, thank you, Council, for your comments and contribution. Thank you for staff as well for the workshop. We are going to call this workshop to a close at 6:08 p.m. We went a little bit over, but I appreciate the dialogue. Let's just take just a 2 or 3 minute recess, and then we'll jump right into the regular session. Good evening, everyone. Would like to say welcome to this Manvel City Council meeting. I am going to call it the regular meeting to order at 6:12 p.m. And just as a point of clarification, I am wearing this Shadow Creek shirt begrudgingly because Mayor Kevin Cole and I had a wager on the game. Shadow Creek won, so I have to wear this tonight, and I have to say fins up, Manvel. Yeah, that hurts. So congratulations to Shadow Creek on beating Manvel in week 1 of the football season. We're going to start with our invocation, and we actually have a special guest here tonight. I met this young man earlier this year. His name is Ethan. He is a resident of Rodeo Palms, and he leads a Bible study through Facebook Live that his mother helps him put on. And so I asked if he would be willing to come and lead us in the invocation tonight, and he said he would. And also thank you, Councilwoman Sarmiento, for backing me up wearing the Manvel gear. So I appreciate that. Offset there. Thank you.
We love our residents.
So Ethan, if you could come forward, buddy. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ethan Moreno, and I am 9 years old. And I'm honored to be here today. And thankful to the city mayor, Dan Davis, for inviting me here and for the invitation to lead this meeting in prayer. The Word of God reads in Psalm 32:8. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. I'm going to do a prayer. Please close your eyes. Heavenly Father, you are our help in times of trouble. We thank you for everyone in this room that has agreed to find solutions to the problems of the people. Lord, you raised leaders to guarantee peace and security to your people. Bless them and pour on them the spirit of wisdom and fear of God. Give them creative ideas for them to build on. Give them the key to all issues they are here to discuss. Glorify your name. All this we ask in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
May we all leave this place with satisfaction in our hearts. And repeat with me. Remember me, my God, for... You're supposed to repeat. Oh, this one. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done.
According to all.
For these people.
For these people.
Nehemiah 5:19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan. You did awesome, buddy. Thank you for being here, dude.
Yeah, Dan.
That's a future leader right there. You want to say something?
Yeah. Yes, I like to make a special prayer going out to those that are experiencing the hurricanes, the flooding, and the wildfires. These are turbulent times, and there's death, and there's loss of homes. Just a special prayer for those.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. We now have the inspirational reading by Councilmember Perry.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I have a short inspirational reading. The past few months, we've been really hammering in on appreciative leadership. And one of those leadership traits, it may sound redundant to some, but it is integrity. And so one of the authors that we were studying, many of you are familiar with Brene Brown, this is her definition of integrity for leaders. It says, choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them is a true definition of leadership integrity. Ms. Brene Brown.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. If you all will join me in standing and saying the pledges. To the U.S. flag, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to the Texas flag,
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, everyone. We now have a few presentations. The first one that we have is by the Brazoria County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So I would like to welcome their Executive Director, Gina, forward, and thank you so much for being here tonight. They'll be next.
I want to thank you, Councilman and Mayor and staff, for allowing me to present to you today. My name is Gina Aguirre Adams, and I'm the President, CEO, and founder of the Brazoria County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So I'd have a little presentation. Just a little bit about us. So I actually founded the chamber in August of 2011. And the reason for starting this organization was there were chambers that I was involved in, which is one of my favorites, is the Manvel Chamber. I started to see that there were not a lot of Hispanics that were a part of the chamber. So I've actually met with some businesses in the south end of the county, and they said, why don't we have a Hispanic chamber? And I said, well, I didn't know there were Hispanic chambers. So did some research and realized that there are Hispanic chambers across the country, and Houston Hispanic Chamber being one of the largest chambers in our country. So just doing the research, I started it from Freeport because they gave me an office. And I asked them, what do you think about me starting a Hispanic chamber of Brazoria County? He says, I absolutely love the idea. We'll give you an office for $1 a year. So that's how we started. So I started out with nothing. Just the passion of wanting to help our community. Actually, at the start of the organization, I started to realize there were just a lot of cultural barriers. There were a lot of Hispanic businesses, but not a lot of people that were. I hear myself talking. I'm sorry. So I realized that there were a lot of resources in our Hispanic businesses, but not anybody connecting the two. So, our organization is about building, international relationships and expanding cultural partnerships. We currently represent 24 incorporated cities because that's what we have in the county. So we have been doing a lot of, our members are from different areas of the county. So, we're trying to look into some areas that I know that are high populated with Hispanics to be able to help them. Our membership encompasses almost 300 members covering the entire county. Our chamber members consist of a diverse range of businesses, including small business enterprise, corporate firms, petrochemical companies, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and municipalities. So the cities that are members and partners with us currently are the city of Freeport, and I didn't put that in here, but it's the city of Freeport, the city of Clute, city of Angleton, and Pearland. Our chamber partners, we are a part of their national chamber, which is the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And then we also, our chamber among 10 other chambers across the state have formed a coalition, which is the Texas Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Coalition. So we do a lot of advocacy for our small businesses on a state level. We do work together with the Greater Angleton Chamber of Commerce. The El Paso Hispanic Chamber is one of the chambers that we utilize because we certify minority businesses to go after state and federal contracts, and they are a certifier, and they're a part of our coalition and also our national chamber. Pearland Chamber of Commerce and Manvel are our sister chambers here locally. That we consider because we're doing events with them. So right now we're planning an actual big event in Pearland. We're looking at Pearland, Manvel, Alvin. I don't know where it's going to be yet, but I actually partnered with the Pearland Chamber on certifying minority businesses. And after doing that event, we certified 26 businesses. And Pearland wanted to do it with me because he doesn't do that. They don't certify. So he said this is a good way to partner. So now we're going to be doing a follow-up of an event where now they have the certification. Now what do you do with it? So that's going to be a really nice event. We actually involved the Alvin Manvel Chamber. He met with us, and so we're going to do something all together. And then also the West Columbia Chamber of Commerce. So our purpose, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is organized to advance the economic and commercial welfare and prosperity of its members and the minority community at large, and also recognizing the cultural diversity of the community. The Hispanic Chamber of Commerce shall strive for unity and inclusiveness of minority entrepreneurship. One of the things that we've been doing also in some of the cities is we have what's called a mesa redonda, and it's an outreach that we do with our Spanish-speaking businesses, because we do have a lot of Spanish-speaking businesses that have business, but they don't know if they're doing business right. So we want to be able to have those type of workshops, kind of roundtables, so they can discuss, what are they doing. I usually have a speaker because one of our partners is SBA. They will kind of guide them and tell them, are you an LLC? They might want to know about what is an LLC, want to know a little bit more about, taxes or business structures and things like that. So that's what we offer. We just had one in Freeport, and we had about 35 people, and that was people that came across the county that came to that, and it was all done in Spanish. So it's a committee that we have that's called SBOC. It's in your packet, Spanish Speaking Business Outreach Committee. So those are the ones that we do everything in English. That's the only committee that we do things in Spanish for our outreach. Our goal is to develop and implement programs, events, services aimed to improving the economic development of Hispanic businesses and non-Hispanic businesses in Brazoria County. I did meet with Mayor, and I talked to him about, we're all about how do you do business with, this is one of the things that we do. Back home, we did how to do business with the port, how to do business with, our industry. So one of the things they would like to know is how to do business with our cities, and we were kind of throwing that around a little bit and saying, what can we do? And also maybe involving the Alvin Manvel Chamber is doing some type of event on how can they do business with the city, just so they can be a little bit more, showing the city being a little bit more open on what is the process, because people don't realize there's always a process in doing business. So it's one of the things that we were talking about. I like to sit with our members and find out what are the needs, what would you want from a chamber of commerce, and that's why we got on that discussion. How can we outreach to our local businesses and give them the resources that they need. I do a lot with SBA. We do a lot of things in English and Spanish with SBA. I'm willing to do workshops as well in different areas. I know we're coordinating right now with the City of doing a small business expo that's in Spanish. So we're just kind of throwing that around, and SBA said, let me know, and we're ready to come down there and do it. So those are the things that we do. Creating international relationships with cities in Brazoria County. One of our first ones was with Altamira, Tamaulipas, and Freeport. So we created that sister city. The delegation came down and we met. That's our board and actually the delegates from Altamira. It's a really nice event. If you don't know what a sister city is, I think I might have put something like that in your packet. If not, I'll definitely email it to you. But it's basically two cities sharing best practices, and you benefit off of the cities. So I think what we found projects out of that is the city of Freeport has some equipment they want to get rid of. So then they're going to give it to their sister city. And then two, Altamira has BASF plant in their city. So that's how they found the similarities. After we created that one, the city of Angleton reached out to us and said, we want an international partner, because it was all over the paper. And they were like, how can we get an international partner? So we created a sister city with Belize. So Belize came down and we did the whole presentation, and they meet on a quarterly basis. So they have a lot of things that they're doing, a lot of projects. So I'm really excited about that. And those are the two mayors and me in the middle signing the documents. It was the original document. So they were our second city. And that's all I have. I don't want to take up too much of your time unless you have any questions.
Well, Gina, thank you so much for being here, and I apologize for misstating your position. I said executive director, and you're actually president /
You can call
CEO,
me
which
whatever
is
you want.
way more important than executive director. But appreciate you being here tonight and presenting this. I know in our conversations, would love to find ways for the city to possibly become a member of the chamber and to partner to serve our community. Does anybody from council have any questions for Gina while she's here? Yeah, go ahead.
I love this so much. I think it's an untapped market, and it's definitely a need in the community. We have a lot of Latina business owners here. You know, Infinity Family Clinic, Tania, she's one of your members. And I think that the more support that we can provide our local business entrepreneurs, the better. I would love to connect with you specifically because I'm coaching new businesses now that don't know where to start when it comes to the LLCs and what's that next step and the taxes and the bookkeeping, getting their EIN numbers and things like that. And so being able to offset that to someone that can take that on is amazing. So thank you so much for what you do, Gina. I love it.
Thank you.
Can't wait to connect with you.
And I would love to connect with you and see what we can do
Definitely.
together to, inform our community.
Definitely.
Gina, thank you for being here. And council, we have information about the chamber as well as Gina's contact information. So I would encourage you to reach out to her. And Gina, I know that you have some people that are here with you tonight. Can you introduce those?
Sorry. I have two of my board members. Leslie, she's with Pearland, and she's with Elements Massage. And then we also have Marvella Cooper, and she's with Angleton IC. So, and then I have my assistant. Oh, Amber's here. Oh, the Boys and Girls Club. So. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So we now have two proclamations, and I've asked some of the members here on council to help me read these. The first that we have is for Patriot Day, which is on September 11th of 2023, and I've asked Councilwoman Sarmiento to read that for us.
Thank you. It's my daughter's birthday, 9/11. All right. Whereas on September 11, 2001, terrorists hijacked 4 civilian aircraft, crashing 2 of them into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and a third into the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C. And whereas the 4th hijacked aircraft crashed into southwestern Pennsylvania after passengers tried to take control of the aircraft in order to prevent the hijackers from crashing the aircraft into an important symbol of democracy and freedom. And whereas these attacks were by far the deadliest terror attacks ever launched against the United States, killing thousands of innocent people. And whereas in the aftermath of the attacks of the people of the United States stood united and demonstrated that in times of hardship, the values that define us do not simply endure, they are stronger than ever. And whereas, as we join in serving causes greater than ourselves and honoring those we lost, let us be reminded of the ways that the victims of 9/11 live on, in the people they loved, the lives they touched, and the courageous acts they inspired. Now, therefore, I, Crystal Sarmiento, Councilwoman, by virtue of our mayor, Dan Davis, the mayor of City of Manvel, Texas, do hereby proclaim September 11th, 2023 as Patriot Day.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Next, we have Councilman Ed Perry, who is going to read the proclamation for National Clean Energy Week, which is September 25th through the 29th, 2023.
Whereas across Texas, clean and abundant forms of energy are powering more homes and businesses than ever before, thanks to renewable sources such as wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, as well as nuclear, natural gas, and carbon capture technologies. And whereas Texas is the leading crude oil and natural gas producing state in the nation and also ranks first in wind-powered electricity generation. And whereas the clean energy sector is a key driver of economic growth in Manvel, with scores of new jobs being added to the industry every year that cannot be outsourced due to the on-site nature of construction, installation, and maintenance. And whereas Manvel must harness the power of Texas entrepreneurs and small businesses and ensure government collaboration to assert American energy leadership and dominance in the global marketplace to ensure low-cost, renewable, and reliable energy. And whereas National Clean Energy Week provides the chance to lift up common sense solutions that will curb climate change while simultaneously preserve the beauty of Texas natural resources. Now, therefore, I, Ed Perry, member of council, on behalf of Dan Davis, by the virtue of the authority vested in him as mayor of the city of Manvel, and on behalf of the citizens of Manvel, do hereby proclaim September 25th through the 29th, 2023 as National Clean Energy Week.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. I'll take those two proclamations from you. Thank you, Councilwoman. So next, we have a public hearing, and I will read off the public hearing. We have some comments that have been submitted for the public hearing, which I'll read out, and then we will open it up to anybody that wishes to speak on the public hearing, and I'll do 3 calls for that. So the public hearing is to hear input from the public regarding the proposed annual budget for the fiscal year of October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. This budget will raise more total property taxes than last year's budget by $1,926,646, or 22.964%. And of that amount, $1,235,669 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year. So the first public comment we have is from Sarah Turpine at 6935 Jordan. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know you will be receiving a ton of comments on the budget and tax rate, but if you wouldn't mind, I would like to put my 2 cents in. Am I fond of the idea of the tax rate staying at 56 cents? No. However, I know that the city is needing staff and materials along with vehicles. I have the time to watch each department's presentation request, and I must say they are using it wisely. However, to not name names, you do not see where specific departments are taking advantage and are requesting so much, but give back how. Mayor, we can see that some of these departments have swayed you and other council members. I do not want to say I have nothing against the police officers, but knowing my tax dollars is paying for so many police officers to have take-home vehicles, may I ask where each officer to sign any form of documentation when requesting take-home vehicles? Our call-outs for police so often they need a take-home vehicle when they do not have shift the next following day. I saw some of the comments on a past Facebook post where other citizens will agree with me that our tax dollars should not go towards the maintenance on take-home vehicles. Mayor, you have promised a lot of things in your campaign that you have held up. But let me say, you may be letting us down with the no new tax rate. From what is being requested by departments, there's no way to fill the needs and watch the city grow if you stunt their tax rate. Mind if I just add that in these comments, you may stop saying our address. You put us citizens out as a target when announcing everything about us. Thank you, Sarah, for your comments. Next, we have Amanda K. at 248 Oak Center. Amanda wrote, Mayor and Council, I would like to thank you for taking the time to read what I have to say. I live just out the outskirts of Manvel in what's called your ETJ. However, I feel I still have a right to voice my opinion since I do pay taxes to you. I would like to say maybe we should agree on a tax rate before you agree on a budget. You cannot agree on a budget and then agree to follow agree on a tax rate. You are asking to make amends almost immediately. I, amongst others, have seen the Mayor Davis post all over social media, and the negativity seems to never be addressed. How do you expect parks and places to hold farmers markets if you have to dig into TERS and the fund balance? Mayor, take the time and listen once again to what your departments are asking for. More staff, that's justified. Extra units, unfortunately, I would disagree. It's upsetting to see on a Brazoria County page one of our officers being blasted for wrecking their units, but yet we grant them take-home vehicles. When allowing take-home vehicles, did anyone account for maintenance for said take-homes? Does each department have that available in their budget? It's upsetting to see that some of these council members are only pro-police but neglect to see potential values in the rest of staff. HR made the comment only 13 staff are doing dependent coverage. Now tell me, what is the city doing for those who do not need dependent coverage? I would like to hear what staff have to say in regards to insurance, those who both need it and don't. What is the count for those who opt out of getting insurance for dependents simply as it did not apply to them? It's upsetting to hear citizens' comments about how teachers are upset about the tax rate, but yet they don't hear us complain about paying the large lump sum to school taxes. With all that being said, keep the tax rate at 56 cents. Mayor, I am sorry if this means you are breaking a promise that you swore you were going to achieve during your campaign, but don't expect a city to grow if you aren't going to help fund. Thank you, Amanda, for your comments. Next, we have Daniel Trueheart at 47 Rodeo Drive. At first, I was wondering why I would see Manvel PD outside its jurisdiction, but it wasn't until a previous council meeting that was it briefly spoken about. I'm sorry, I don't appreciate my tax dollars going to multiple take-home vehicles. I honestly believe this should have been something the citizens to vote on. To allow officers to have take-home vehicles is a major privilege. To see how much more fuel is being used to drive their homes, how many more oil changes and tire rotations, just overall vehicle maintenance that is needed. But to think they could use these vehicles for the extra jobs. Man, that's a double whammy. It is sad that I've now lived here for over 6 years, and yes, as life itself has become more expensive, so are taxes. And each year, a good portion of the citizens of Manvel taxes go to the PD. Bias much? Shall we bring up how the chief of police himself at a former council meeting said when speaking to the association, "Excuse me, sir, but from my understanding, there was supposed to be a separation between the chief and the association, correct?" Or to hear some council members asking the PD if they will be purchasing this new expensive drone. Such a shame. We seem to give and give to these officers, but yet we have roads that need to be widened and fixed, but can't do that because it's not a main priority item. We have water that tastes like pure chlorine, yes, because that's safe for children. In the past year or two, I have seen and heard about how much the crime rate has gone up, but not a single PD in sight. Hey, unless they are all meeting for lunch and dinner, right? We've had a unit flip and was on the news right outside of my neighborhood, or the officer that was shown on a Brazoria County Facebook page that had totaled that vehicle. I see so many cop cars at the PD. I guess they believe they can afford to damage a few with no consequences, right? $190 plus added to my taxes because the idea was pitched to be 56%. Keep it, don't lower it, because when the city crumbles, good luck convincing us to raise the rate. Mayor, you need to fix the safety and spending of the city. Thank you, sir, for your comment. Next, we have Sandra McNabb, 271 Oakcrest. Hello, Mayor and Council. I want to say I think how y'all have been handling the budget has been spectacular. Back to the basics. I like the theme. However, something at the budget town hall and some previous council meetings has curious minds wondering. If the chief of police is trying to attain officers and help pay to achieve their T-goal, will the remaining staff be offered the same for college classes, college certifications, or even outside certifications? I have seen how many was taken out of the budget just for travel and training. And I'm also curious, does everyone get this opportunity? Not just your law enforcement or directors. What about the clerks, administrative assistants, and the such? Before I let you go, I do want to make a small remark on the wages. I agree that 3% is decent. I don't believe it's fair, maybe 5%, but that's here nor there. But what I don't agree with is the 3% to the hourly is pennies on the dime compared to the amount in which it'll give the salary. Employees. Excuse me. In most businesses, you'll have your hourly employees who bust their rear at work to go home and barely have enough to make ends meet. I think maybe the salary staff, considering they just received dependent coverage, maybe should get a smaller percentage compared to hourly. But again, who am I to tell you how to pay? Thank you, Sandra, for your comments. The last written comment that we have is from Jared Jennings at 17 Shapiro Drive. The mayor politicized taxes and dragged the prior administration online repeatedly for not adopting the no new revenue rate. Some of city council rode his coattails on the same issue. I'm committed to cutting taxes while funding essential services. If the city of Manvel wanted to keep our tax payments the same, they could adopt the no new revenue rate. Instead, they are considering a tax rate of 0.573, the voter approval rate at that time. In order for your taxes not to go up, fight the value and ask your elected officials to adopt the no new revenue rate. I think there should be a charter amendment that says that the tax rate is going to be adopted above the no new revenue revenue rate. It has to go to the voters for approval. Today's no new revenue rate is .496003. Not 56 cents, not 52 cents, not 51 cents, 49.6003. I appreciate the comments about 56 cents being the lowest in 25 years, but let's not misrepresent the information. Today's voter approval rate of .560708 is the result of the work of last year's leadership. If not for their policies and budgeting, the voter approval rate today would be higher. Please do not grandstand like the 56 rate is some grand achievement of this year's leadership. You are limited by state law and time to set the tax rate at or below the voter approval rate. Even at that rate, it's the lowest in 25 years. Well, I guess you did set the cap, .00708, below the voter approval rate, or 8,070,000ths of a penny per 100. In relatable terms, that's a staggering $2.12 a year on a $300,000 home. Why is the mayor recommending and defending a tax rate above the NNR rate when he preached the NNR rate and dragged the prior group repeatedly through the mud during his campaign for not adopting the NNR rate? Why increase the taxes on residents instead of going after BCAD for valuing commercial property 25% less than they should according to the recent property value study? Why does Camillo have 213 rental homes with an average value of just $149,000 for income-generating properties? While promising to lower taxes, voters were assured that other matters would be handled. Make sure roads get fixed and drainage is improved. The money is in the budget to do this. The money is in the budget to increase employee pay. 7% wasn't a good start because it wasn't enough. There's $33 million sitting in a savings account that the city can tap into at any time. I don't work in hypotheticals. I operate from what I know. The money is in the budget. The 7% last year is interesting because what is currently proposed is 6%, but 3% of that is discretionary based on performance. But the incremental raises battling 6% inflation does not elevate MPD officers to a competitive salary. An officer seeking employment in a different district recently told me, "I'd love to work close to home, but Manvel doesn't pay." To quote the mayor, as a city council and city staff, we need to be accountable to the people first and foremost. I challenge the mayor and city council to live by those words and adopt the no new revenue rate. I'd like to end with another quote. A person is measured by their word. It's their value. If you make a promise, you better follow through, because if you can't live up to your word, if people can't depend on you, you have no value. My father, thank you. So that wraps up all of the written comments that were submitted for the public hearing. What I'd like to do now is open it up to anybody that's here that wishes to speak. We will do the first call for the public hearing. And if you'd like to speak, please come forward. Thank you for being here. If you can state your name and address, that would be great.
Good evening, Council. My name is Marianne Atkinson, 7425 Jordan Road. I am very glad that Councilman Ed Perry and Harry said what they said. I think we should not lower the tax and then be hit in a couple of years with a huge tax rate that will make everything else mute at this point. If we can stay where we're at and still be in the budget, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for your comments. Do we have anyone else that is wishing to speak for the public hearing? All right, I'll do the second call. Of course. Thank you for being here, Nicole. If you can state your name and address, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
We're fancy up here now.
I just like to be able to see everyone, so. Hey. It's been a while since I've been here in person for a meeting, but I've watched the live streams and the workshops and the meetings very regularly, especially when it comes to budget season. So those of you who have been here long enough know exactly who I am for good and bad reasons. But for those of you who are new to your roles, here's what you need to know about me. My name is Nicole Mitchell. I've been a resident of Manvel and Lakeland since 2016, and my address is 6726 Austin Cove. So that is also when I began to get involved with the city. I've served on task forces like the original events committee, commissions like the most recent charter review commission, and collaborated with boards like the Parks Board, and attended countless meetings prior to the live streams being available, which has made a huge difference. So thank you for that. For the last 4 years, I've served on the TERS, or the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Board, and the SMDA, as was mentioned in the workshop. And those are both associated with the Meridiana development. And I'm sure there'll be more about that in the meeting, in the update. I saw that on the agenda. But I'm here tonight to share a few of my concerns about what I've heard in recent budget and tax rate discussions and encourage you to do the right thing. We're at a critical crossroad right now in Manvel, and you are responsible for the decision that determines what reality we live for the next fiscal, not just the next fiscal year, but the reality that we live for years to come. While I understand the hesitations around any tax increase, it may not necessarily look, I don't necessarily look forward to receiving my tax bill every year either, but it's imperative that we address this matter right now and head on to secure the financial stability and well-being of our community and its future. This is not an opportunity to defer an issue for another legislator. This is not an opportunity to earn a feather for anyone's cap, and it's not an opportunity to make good on a campaign promise. This is an opportunity to use the information that you've been given as an elected official, information that you didn't have before when you were just a citizen, to make fiscally responsible decisions on behalf of the city for its best interest. We cannot stop the growth. We shouldn't stop the growth. We should prepare for the growth, and we should control the growth. I trust that each of you have done your due diligence and on this proposed budget and tax rate topic. I trust that you're thinking critically about what your decision means for not only the citizens of this city, but for the employees and city operations. You've heard a lot about citizens who can't afford to pay a single penny more in taxes to the city of Manvel, including our mayor. Can you imagine what would happen if we chose to lower the tax rate by 0.1 cent now and are forced to actually raise it later? 1 cent, not 0.1, and actually raise it later, like Marion noted, forcing a much larger tax bill on our citizens and it still not be enough. What is the contingency plan? What happens when we have an incidental expense issue? Challenge it, question it. I would rather each household have to come up with $16 a month now than much more all at once later. After your terms end, and you work your way into Manvel's long-term history, what is the impact that you want to have on the city? Do you want the record to show that you did the right thing in the long term to properly manage the needs of the city? Or do you want the record to show that you did the wrong thing, but placed a shiny feather in your mayor's cap to help him deliver on his campaign promise? Mayor Davis, he's good at what he does, and he's destined for a long career in politics, and he's going to do much bigger things. And when he's gone, I would like to stay right here. So please use your voice and your vote to make the city a place that I continue to proudly call home and continue to raise my family. I urge you to prioritize the financial health of our community by adopting the proposed budget and 56-cent tax rate for the 2024 fiscal year. I'm looking to you to secure a prosperous and thriving future for this city and its residents. Failure to act now will put an unbearable strain on our city's operations and services, making it nearly impossible to recover financially in the future and control the inevitable growth. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Nicole. While we do an exchange of the mic, I'll do a second call for anybody that would like to speak in the public hearing. We will do a third call for anybody that wishes to speak for the public hearing. So we will now close this public hearing at 6:50 p.m. Thank you, everybody that submitted comments and also spoke here tonight as well. We now have one public comment card, and speaking of the budget and the tax rate, this person is involved in a project that is going to produce a lot of property tax and sales tax for the city, so we're excited about that. I'd like to call forward Mr. Sean, who is speaking tonight on agenda item number 7, which is the PUD variance. So Sean, can you please state your name and who you are with?
Yeah, I imagine you might struggle with the last name. It's Terry Smith, first name Sean. I guess if I could give you an address, 425 Sawdust Spring, Texas. So City Council, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you guys having us on the agenda tonight. They say everything's bigger in Texas, including apparently our signs. And we went ahead and designed a building that we were expecting to put a 10-foot big, beautiful HEB sign on, and we found at the point we were going through the permitting process that our PUD, or Plan Unit District Design Guidelines, only allowed for 80. So we are asking here for your all's input later on the agenda, number 7 this evening, to allow us to put the sign up that we expected to put on our building. Right now, you can see right now we have pretty significant progress happening out there. It'd be a shame to have such a small letter set on there, but we're really excited about the progress we're making out here because you're going to start seeing signs go up for our grand opening. Then next month we'll have our store leader come by and speak to you all as well, Mr. Malcolm McKenzie. So we're really looking forward to that. But happy to address any questions. I have my signage consultant here this evening as well if we have any questions on the agenda.
Well, thank you, Sean. And what we'll do for you, since you're here tonight, we'll move your agenda item up to the front. That way we can get you guys heading home. So, but I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Sean. And then, council, if we have any questions for Sean and his team, we'll ask them during that agenda item. Do I have anyone else that wishes to provide a public comment? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, we will now move on to the city manager update. Dan, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first item I wanted to talk to you about was the drought contingency plan. For those newer council folks that don't know, we do have a drought contingency plan that consists of 5 different stages, the first being mild and voluntary, all the way down to stage 5, which is mandatory in its emergency situation. So because we have 3 water plants now between Manvel Town Center and the high school plant and our original plant on School Road, we actually have not had to trigger even stage 1, amazingly. Stage 1 gets triggered whenever our total water demand equals or exceeds the trigger for 3 consecutive days. And the first trigger is 60% of our overall water production. So we haven't hit that threshold yet, amazingly. Now, driving through the subdivisions, the grass, I'm sure all of us are, most of us are in the same position. I mean, it's basically, we're making hay right now instead of grass, right? So I think Brooke, probably a month or so ago, put up on the website kind of some provisions to help conserve, just because it's the right thing to do. Watering, from midnight to 10 in the morning, or from 8 p.m. until midnight. Those are some options that you can do. But again, right now it's just a voluntary basis. We do appreciate it, but we're so far so good on the drought contingency plan. I can forward that to a plan to y'all, just so you'll have it kind of handy. The second one was the SMDA meeting. We talked about that during the workshop a little bit. One other thing that I didn't mention was in the clawback discussion, the cost of service discussion. We got SMDA to go ahead and identify the manner in which we will calculate the residential units. If you recall, there were 3 different phases for the clawback. The first 10 years was $430 per residential unit. Second phase was $645 per residential unit. And then the third phase, the final 20 years, is $1,000 per unit. So it's important for us to, were we going to use platted lots? Were we going to use certificates of occupancy? What were we going to use? And so SMDA agreed that we're going to use the actual number of that comes from the county, is the easiest way to say it. So there's 2 components. One is the residential inventory that has improvements on there, and then the number 2 is the ones that are actually tagged as residential inventory. So when you combine those 2, we have, for the first 10 years, right around 60 units. Those were there before Meridian ever even came to town. So we do get to claw back on those. We do get to charge for the cost of service on those. Then starting in 2021, then those numbers started going up into the 300s, 400s. Now we're almost 600 units out there. So that's only going to keep growing, of course. We'll hit probably 1,000 units this next year. So that's how we're able to estimate the corresponding cost of service fees. Anyway, just wanted to mention that to you. One last thing is something that has been, we've been working on. I know that we've been working on it at least 5 years. It is something to celebrate. We now have, as of, I guess, this morning at 6 a.m., Brazoria County Conservation and Reclamation District number 3, the CNR 3, that's the one in Alvin, that consumes about 51% of our city. Most of our city is in CNR 3, and we have a signed interlocal agreement with CNR 3. So very excited to get that one across the finish line. So that one will be on your next agenda on the 18th. And
amended first, though.
What's that?
No, later.
Okay. Let's see. If all goes well, on September 11th, next Monday, we will be having a joint public a joint workshop between council and PD&Z. So we don't do these too often, but we might have two of them coming up here in the next month or so. The one on Monday would be to talk about a disannexation or a de-annexation on the far east side of Pomona. We've done it before. We didn't go to the trouble to have a joint workshop, but staff thinks that it's a good approach because if the applicant comes straight to council, then that's sort of bypassing PD&Z, which is your recommendation board. If they go straight to PD&Z, then that, what if council doesn't want to even entertain this? So stay tuned, but we think it's going to be Monday. Does that still look like it's going to happen, Tammy? Okay. At 6 or at 6? Okay. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that update, and it's very exciting about the interlocal agreement. I know we had that conversation with them, and to see it, hopefully, all goes well at our next meeting, actually get accomplished. So I appreciate everybody's work on that. We'll now go to the consent agenda. Do I have any comments or questions about the consent agenda? I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. And with council's consent, I'd like for us to jump to agenda item number 7 first. Is anybody opposed to that? Okay. So Dan, I'll read this item and then turn it over to you. This is consideration and possible action to approve a variance to the Manvel Town Center planned unit development provided in Exhibit E of Ordinance 2017-0-33, Section 4, Project Plan Description E, signage for wall-mounted signage, C, anchor tenants over 80,000 square feet to allow for a wall signage exceeding the maximum height allowance for 92 inches.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to actually turn this one over to Joe's.
Welcome, Joe's.
Mayor and Council, Sean gave you a little bit of background on why this is on the agenda. Staff reviewed the request. Some of the staff findings is listed in the report. To summarize it, it's a unique situation. The difference is not significant from the 92 to like the 10 feet sign. The building is set back from Highway 6, both the streets. So the applicant is trying to balance visibility and aesthetics because you have pad sites fronting along Highway 6 as well. Staff is not anticipating any negative impact in terms of traffic or the general aesthetics of the whole town center. So staff is recommending approval.
Thank you, Joe's. Yeah, definitely not a negative impact, a positive impact, right? Thank you. Sean, can we lock you guys into a grand opening date yet? Do you guys have anything in mind?
Come on.
As soon as the billboards go up, you'll get to see the opening. Look forward to selling you all your holiday.
Sounds good. I think we can read between the lines there. Yeah, appreciate that. Council, do you have any comments or questions? No? Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Which one of you wants it? I see. All right, we'll give it to the Mayor Pro Tem. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Thanks, y'all, for being here tonight. Appreciate you. So we're going to jump back up to, we have no items removed from the consent agenda, so regular agenda item number 1 is consideration and possible action to schedule the adoption date for the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget for September 18th, 2023. Dan?
So Mayor, as I told you earlier today, if I did this correctly, I have someone assigned to all 6 of the next agenda items tonight. So if all goes well, this one's going to be for Tammy.
So Mayor and Council, the only reason this item is on the agenda this evening is that the government code dictates that after the budget hearing, the city council must take some form of action. Since we're not necessarily ready to adopt tonight, that action is just setting a date. So that's all you're doing, just setting the date for the adoption date.
Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. Any comments, questions from council? Okay, do I have a motion to set the date for the 18th?
I'll make a motion that we set the date for September 18th.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Agenda item number 2, consideration and possible action to approve the second and final reading of ordinance 2023-0-28. Dan?
Yes, Mayor. So ordinarily, whenever you see a second and final reading on your agenda, it's going to be in the consent agenda. But as I understand it, Councilman Lands wanted to discuss this. There was a 6-1 vote on the first reading. And so I think Councilman Lands has some ideas about maybe some opportunities to amend that tonight.
Yes, just a couple of concerns I have because of the way it's written is pretty, I know I've met with you, Dan, and I met with our Public Works, and I think we're on the same page as for the trees that we have, that there's not an issue with the height, but still, the way this is worded, it could be open to a different regime or whatever coming in, that they could say, hey, we're gonna chop away at these trees. And I would love to see something in here. And Dan, I think we had a small conversation on this. It'd be kind of difficult to address historic trees. How do you prove a tree's age? Is it 100 years old? I mean, we really can't, it's hard to do that. So another idea that I would like us to consider is, let's look at the size of the tree. Like I was saying, okay, maybe a tree that's 100-inch circumference or larger. Instead of the 100 years, let's look at the 100-inch circumference or larger. That kind of tree may need to have a little extra care or concern, and maybe that landowner, that homeowner, should be asked, their position on cutting those limbs. I do understand that if a limb is going to hit a 18-wheeler or a school bus or a fire truck, that's definitely not a good thing. But however, just going out and measuring with a 15-foot rule and saying, this is too short, we got to cut it, knowingly that a fire truck or a school bus could easily pass under it. I wish there could be some give and take on that. And the only thing I can think of is to try to put in some parameters like the size of the tree and the approval from the landowner themselves.
And the mayor and I spoke a little bit about this earlier. So the only concern that I think that we had at the staff level was about getting permission, so to speak, from the landowner. Is if the tree is, if the branches are causing an issue in the public right of way, then it's an issue that needs to be taken care of. Whether trying to choose my words thoughtfully there, the idea of circumference, I think we can absolutely work with that. And maybe if it is over 100 inches, for instance, then that's when we would probably bring in our professional anyway. Robbie will typically consult with an actual arborist to come in, and then we talk about it. So I think we could probably add some verbiage pretty easily in there. Would we need to have a second or third reading, I guess, if we change it tonight?
Just table this until next meeting, we can come back with another change.
Or we could table it, I guess, yeah. And I also want to mention, for the most part, this isn't a proactive situation. As far as I know, we're not going out looking for trees. It's really more complaint-driven. We hear from the AISD school folks, the bus barn, or we hear from the fire department, or we hear from the garbage folks every once in a while. But it's usually more reactive, and so the idea is that we want to go visit with the homeowners. I mean, that's really what sparked this in the first place, was a similar situation to what you have, where really mature, beautiful oak trees that you don't want to just go hacking away, like you would at a deer lease or something. You really want to take care of those. So what is your pleasure, council? Would you rather us table and trying to work on that verbiage? Is this overall council's idea, or?
Yeah, I think setting a parameter for some of the historic trees, we have a lot of those in the Oak Crest area, Gates Loop area. You have those along Old Chocolate Bayou as well. And I think the branches and limbs for those trees are certainly unique. So I would have no issue with setting an additional parameter regarding the trunk size. You know, you do a certain circumference based off of a certain height of the ground, triggers bringing out an actual arborist for that because of the nature of the tree. Whether or not I'd be fine with making an amendment motion tonight. That way we can get this policy in place instead of delaying it for 2 weeks, if we're good with that. But I have no issue with tabling it as well. But it seems like a pretty simple, straightforward amendment. Council, do you guys have any comments or questions? Councilman?
Who's going to pay for that? Who would pay for the arborist to come out for an opinion?
The city.
The city would.
Sure.
Right, when the responsibility is really the property owners, right? It's their tree branches hanging over the street, right? If the property owner doesn't want the tree branch cut, then I would say it's the burden of responsibility for the arborist on them, because it's their tree, right? I mean, it's their tree that's hanging out over
I agree with
the
that.
street. I mean, I get it, because I know what it looks like, like if Centerpoint comes and cuts, it's ugly. Mm-hmm. Right? But over time, a tree branch grows, the branches get heavy, where a little tree trimming would be, but then, so now the taxpayer's gonna have to pay for that guy to come out and say, yeah, you gotta cut them branches. Who's going to cut the branches?
Yeah, possibly we just add a situation that after notice, if any property owner wants to incur the costs of getting the tree trimming done themselves at their own expense, they would have that option instead of the city coming out, no matter if it's a historic tree, a 100-inch caliper tree. That happened to me with Centerpoint. I have a large oak tree, and they said, well, if you want to do it at your own expense, hire your arborist, and that's exactly what I did, because I saw what they were doing down Hanselman. Maybe we could just add after C, we could add a D that says, after notice, if the resident wishes to do the work themselves at their own expense, they would have that option. Maybe we could just do that.
Would that be something you would support, Councilman? Yeah. What about you, Councilman Lands? Is that something you could get behind?
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure if Barry was talking about just an arborist for his opinion or for...
No, I'm just talking about the tree branches that are hanging over the streets.
For the cutting itself.
Yeah. For the cutting of itself, right? I've seen where the trash truck comes along and the branch come down and wow, right? Now you've damaged the tree, right? So now the tree's going in shock because the big branch has just been ripped off. I get it, right? We don't want it ugly, but I don't think that we all get the shit, the property owner said, hey, this is what it's going to look like if we do it. Here's your opportunity to fix it in so many days, because we're going to come through. Because the trash company, the bus, the school bus, or somebody said something already, it's a problem.
Right.
It's a problem, right? My motorhome, if I come through their motorhome and it takes off my AC, who gets to buy that? Me, right? I mean, it's not fair, right? Because you're a tree branch that we didn't want to cut, nobody wanted to cut.
Right.
Right? And I didn't know that tree branch was low hanging, didn't have a sign on it, right? So we've got to, I get that we don't want it ugly, but there's got to be a timeline to say, it's been identified as a concern. This homeowner could have so many days to resolve the issue. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen.
Well, I definitely agree that if a limb's low enough that it is getting hit, that it needs to be removed.
Right. It's a problem.
My concern is if it's 15 feet's pretty high. My concern is if school buses, fire trucks, dump trucks, trash trucks are passing under it comfortably, about somebody else coming out with a tape measure and saying that's 14'6". We're going to get rid of that limb that's this big around. That's my concern.
I understand. Yeah.
Councilman Opliger, do you think we can get more sound effects from you moving forward? That was pretty good. That was a great sound effect.
Is it mumbling?
No, you kapow. I loved it. I'm sorry. That was just good. Caught me by surprise. Kind of jumped. Dan.
Where did we land? I think Bobby had a suggestion for an item D. Would that get
Yeah,
to item D?
I think if council's good, I know Councilwoman Sarmiento has something. I think if we table this, just because there's been a little bit of back and forth, you two council members, if you guys can sync up with Dan and Robbie, draft some language, and if you guys are on board with it, then we could include it in the consent agenda. It seems like we all have the same thinking. We want something done here, but I think trying to shoot from the hip right now, and I just want to make sure that we are thorough with it. But Councilwoman Sarmiento.
I think Attorney Bobby hit the nail on the head, really. He said, look, why don't we just give them the option? I don't think we should, this is not rocket science, it's pretty logical. We want to preserve the trees. We don't want them in the right-of-way, harming cars, bus barn trucks. I mean, it's pretty logical. And so, in my opinion, based on what you just said, is we could simply change the language to say, we'll give you notice, and you have the option, and if you don't do it by then here's your notice that we're cutting it down. I mean, obviously, nobody wants that, right? Especially those gorgeous trees on Patterson. I mean, it's magical when you drive down there, truly. However, I think that we should just decide, honestly. I mean, I'm okay both ways. I'm okay if we table it and finesse the language, but if Bobby says that we can move forward with that, why not?
I thought he said table it. Did I miss something?
Originally it said table, but then after discussion offered to add a subsection D, saying basically after notice, the residents can do the trimming themselves at their own expense.
And so the notice right now is 24 hours?
Yes. Item C says residents should be notified of tree trimming by city 24 hours in advance. Is what
Would we want to, with adding in this additional language, would we want to increase that time from 24 hours to 48 hours or 72 hours, so that way you give the person ample time to respond?
If we're going to go down that route of, okay, you've been now notified, some people may not be able to call somebody to come and trim their trees in 3 days or 2 days. I mean, that in and of itself could be a process of what if they can't come trim it? What if the next available date is 2 weeks out? So that's where it gets kind of tricky, in my opinion, because how do you give somebody 24-hour notice, which we voted on? Great. But if it's a beautiful tree, I don't want to just hire anybody. I wouldn't imagine that, people want just anybody coming to trim their tree. You want to do your due diligence. You want to shop around. I think that would take time. I don't know how much time that would take because I don't have beautiful trees on my property, but, just something to think about.
And the way that I think it would read, Councilwoman, is that it's, let's say, a 72-hour notice to get in contact with the city to say, we are handling this ourselves.
I like that.
And then if the city has to come back out and you haven't handled it yourself and you haven't communicated with the city, at that point, it's snip, snip. But Councilman Perry.
So with that addition, is that something that we can do now, or do we need to table it to make sure the wording is right?
Your motion to add in subsection D.
Yes. So I think I can.
After said notice, we'll take the notice to 72.
Yes. So
After said notice, the resident may choose to notify the city that they would trim the trees themselves at their own expense.
So I will make an amendment to ordinance 2023-0-29 to cover the two items as stated by Bobby Gervais.
One more thing. You could not find anything in the previous city write-up about the 13-foot height? Okay. Because I think about a year or so ago, somewhere I found in there the 13-foot, because that's when I contacted Kyle, that we did have one limb that was below 13 foot that needed to be cut. So I'm not quite sure where I found that, but, okay.
I don't know if it was a policy or something. We looked for it in the ordinance and couldn't find it. So that's kind of what it led us down this path was, hey, we need to hard code something in there so that we're all on the same page.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Okay, this is just the amendment right now, then we'll vote on the main motion with the amendment. All those in favor? All those opposed? So the amendment passes unanimously 7-0. Now, I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-0-28 as amended. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Look at that, guys. We worked through that. Nice. Love it. We will move on to agenda item number 3, consideration and possible action to approve the first of 2 readings of ordinance 2023-0-29.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to turn this one over to Jessica and probably a little bit of Chief as well.
I don't think I have the right things in front of me. Wrong one. Sorry, thank you. All right. In the ordinance that's before you, we've updated the definition for a restaurant to something that actually matches what we would define in a restaurant. That basically takes out things that aren't included for a restaurant: your grocery stores, convenience stores, daycares, public and private schools, governmental entities, churches, nonprofit entities, businesses not generally open for public access. The main portion of this is with grease traps. So we added some information in here regarding grease traps and interceptors. So you'll find it now with 4 different ways that it's been broken up. That would be for a new commercial shell building, all other commercial buildings, whether you're subletting or renting some space, and then if you had an undersized grease trap. Before, it said you just had to have a 500-gallon grease trap. What we wanted to do was we wanted to recognize that maybe not all businesses need a 500-gallon grease trap, or maybe they need something that's a little bit bigger than that. So what we said is, okay, all of these commercial buildings, if you need a food, if you are a food establishment, we have a worksheet from TCEQ that can be used by a certified plumber to state what you would need as that food establishment compared to perhaps maybe a coffee shop or a fried restaurant establishment, right? So those would be 2 different things in there. The new commercial shell building basically is, I'm building my commercial building, and I use the example of Meridiana Parkway and Highway 6 right now. You can see the tilt walls going up. That's a shell building. We don't necessarily know what the occupants are. If that property owner or that developer wants to put in a grease trap or interceptor at the time of building that, we said, okay, well, here's the calculations on how you're going to do that. And it's based on a 2,500 square foot equaling 500-gallon grease trap. So that's just if you're being proactive. A lot of times we'll see somebody that they want to put it in, and then other times they don't. The example on Meridiana Parkway and State Highway 6, they've opted to not put in a grease trap at this time. So depending on what food establishments, if or any, come in at that location, then we'll make that determination based on TCEQ's sizing worksheet. Again, if there are any sublets or rental space within a business, there may be fluctuation in that. There may be not. And then for undersized grease traps, just saying, you may have had business A that was in this establishment, and business A moved out. Now business B is coming in. Okay, well, when you're coming in, we're going to determine if you're undersized or oversized or what it is. The goal of it is that you would have the appropriate grease trap and interceptor for the food establishments. We didn't want overkill, but we didn't want it to be where grease was maybe poured into our system. We put in some terminology that's a lot more specific, having to do with TCEQ as far as frequency and cleaning and how that looks. It's the same as it was before. It said it was every 90 days or every 3 months. We just got a little bit more specific with that. So that's the ordinance before you in a nutshell.
Well, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that update. Dan, do you have anything to add there?
No, just the worksheet itself. I'm really glad that Jessica was able to find that, because maybe it's the engineer in me, just some sort of basis on why it needs to be this size, or why is 500 from the wastewater treatment plant operation. Why are we still getting so many fatty, greasy? Why are we getting so much at the treatment plant? Where is this coming from? Oh, well, here's why. Because this particular restaurant is sending us a lot of waste that they're not capturing because their grease trap is undersized or whatnot. So anyway, the fact that it's a TCEQ worksheet is even better. So it's a standard, And anyway, I'm glad we found that.
Appreciate that, Dan. I have a few questions just for clarity's sake. Can you outline for us where we pulled the definition of restaurant from and how we have at the local level the ability to define that definition?
Sure, Mayor. And so at the last meeting, we would incorrectly try to modify the definition of a food establishment, and that's why we put a pause button on that. So the definition of a restaurant, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one we loosely got from the TIFRA code, but that's a local amendment, a local definition, if you will, right?
That's correct. That falls under the 33-3 local amendments and definitions of our ordinance, which allows us to identify the restaurant and the definition of what the restaurant would be. As like Jessica said, some things were defined previously as a restaurant, which are not restaurants. So the meeting we had, we talked about, she came up with this definition that we incorporated in. I'm not going to take the credit for it. I'm going to give it to her because it was a pretty good definition. So it was something that we needed to look at based off some of the situations we were having with some of our local businesses. So basically what it is, it just takes out, like she said, some of the areas that are not defined or are considered as restaurants or food handlers. I won't say food handlers because that opens up a whole new can of worms. But it just defines more clarity on what a restaurant is, basically.
And I like the definition of it as well, because other areas of our code, such as for mobile food unit, references restaurants in regards to certain regulations, and so better defining that helps. Just one other question and then one comment, then we'll turn it over to Councilwoman Sarmiento. Chief, could you speak to the process that we're going through in updating our codes regarding TIFR and the work that you're doing on that?
Well, I'm not going to take credit for that either. I'm going to give that to Cap McLean. He's actually been the one that's been doing a lot of the research and work on it. But what we're looking at is there's the 2021 TIFRA code that's out there. Right now, we have adopted and are following the 2015 TIFRA code, and that's the Texas Food and Retail Establishment Code. That's it, right? Texas Food Establishment Regulations. So basically what we're doing is we've gone through and looked at the new codes, and we're starting to compile some high points and things that we really have to start looking at. And that's going to allow us to update our codes to the current version, which is the 21 version. I really don't want to get too deep into the weeds of it right now because there is a lot of change to it. It's going to take us quite a bit of time to make these changes. It's not going to be an overnight process. There's going to have to be a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings before we actually come up with the proposed language on it. But there's going to be a lot of regulations that have changed and that are going to be changing based off of the 2015 and 2021 code.
And if I could, Mayor, so this is one of the few that's left. Earlier in the year, we updated all of our international codes to the most current. We went through, 13 or so different codes, your residential code, building code, electric code, energy code, all of those. We brought those all up to the current. And this is one of the few that we just haven't got to yet because it's a little more encompassing, but it's the next one to come.
And I'm excited that we're working on this, and thank you, sir, for your work, because City Code used to state until a few years ago that we would abide by the most recent version, but then it was changed to specifically reference 2015, and the 2021 allows some more flexibility, better support of our local businesses, but ultimately more local control, which is a good thing, a positive thing. The other thing that I like, and I'll turn it over to the councilwoman, is that this change to the grease trap ordinance specifically models the approach after cities like Pearland, Alvin, and Angleton, where if you discharge fats, oils, or greases to the public wastewater system, that's what triggers your need to have a grease trap. So if you're on your own septic, or if you are a food establishment that does not discharge any fats, oils, or greases, then you do not have to have a grease trap. But as an example, the ability to upsize is put on the Public Works Director or their designee. States like, for example, Elevate Nutrition. They don't produce any fog. But if they move out and a business comes in, a food establishment comes in that now produces a lot of grease, well, that's our ability, that's our trigger to require that a grease trap be put in. So I like that approach. I think that's a more realistic and practical approach that's there. So I appreciate everybody's work on this. Councilwoman Sarmiento.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood what Jessica said. So, for example, if a new building goes in and it's 2,500 square feet, previously we would err on the side of caution and require a 50-gallon, you said? Is that right? Or
Right now, so the way the regulations read, and I'll use the Shell commercial building at Meridiana, we would say a 500-gallon grease trap.
500-gallon, okay.
That's it. I assume that if something else was coming in, we'd do that same requirement because it was 500 per food establishment. So what we wanted to do was, recognize, having the other thing too that I'm sorry I didn't hit upon was having a communal grease trap, because right now we don't allow communal grease traps. So it's just trying to be proactive that if you have maybe multiple food establishments that are going to be coming in, putting that in, but then maybe through changes of occupancies, maybe that does get reduced. We just wanted to be able to acknowledge what was maybe actually being put out of the system in regards to the grease.
So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, the changes in the ordinance is ultimately making it more favorable and easier to do business with food service providers.
The change in the ordinance is trying to actualize what's coming out of that restaurant and being put into the system instead of a one size may or may not fit all approach.
Okay. And so in this case, this would be favorable for an establishment like Elevate Nutrition that they don't cook, it's all smoothies, right? Or
I am not a certified plumber by any means, but common sense would tell me that you probably wouldn't need a 500-gallon grease trap, maybe for that business, depending on what's they're doing at that business. So that's what, like I said, that's what we're trying to acknowledge. Maybe it's a very small grease trap. I don't know. But I don't think it's 500 gallons.
So what we're saying is that an establishment like Elevate Nutrition would still be required to have some type of grease trap, even if it's smaller? Is that what I just heard you say? You said not 500. You wouldn't think that they would be required to have a 500-gallon tank?
The ordinance says that all food establishments have to have a grease trap interceptor, period.
So if they're serving any consumable, edible type form of food, anything, they have to have a grease trap.
You're considered a food establishment, and once you're considered a food establishment, then you have to have
falls
a
under
grease
that,
trap.
so it needs to be done. Okay, perfect. I have that understanding now.
Well, just a point of clarification there. I think it's one of the amendments to Chapter 33 states that if you discharge into the public system, fats, oils, or greases. So if you're a food establishment that doesn't discharge fats, oils, or greases, you don't need a grease trap.
But that's not what she said.
No, the Mayor's correct. The language that was added in just today makes it clear that you have to discharge fats, oils, and/or greases, number one, and it has to be into the city sanitary sewer. So if you meet those requirements, if the food establishment meets those requirements, then this grease trap interceptor requirement kicks in.
And there's
It does kick in.
It does kick in if you discharge into the sanitary system and you produce, the acronym is FOG, fats, oils, or greases. And there's a few other good things with this. I love, Jessica, that you guys found this and that it has to be a licensed or certified plumber that does this. I think it takes any potentially perceived bias out of it to say, here's the calculation that's submitted with your plans and your permits for approval. I also like, for example, all of our schools in Manvel right now have grease traps. And according according to the current code, it says regardless of how much grease you produce, every 3 months you have to pay to get it cleaned and provide proof of that to the city. So the school district pays $1,500 per school every 3 months to get it cleaned, even though there probably isn't anything in there. So there's also some parameters built in that says that if it's at a certain level of grease that's in the trap or in the interceptor, that's what triggers your need to clean it out on a 3-month basis and then provide proof of that to the city. So it's a more practical, cost-friendly approach while also protecting the city's sanitary system, which is extremely important. We don't want to compromise standards just for the sake of being business friendly, but we want to be practical and reasonable with the approach as well. I think staff's nailed the head with this. So any other comments or questions from council?
I think it's great that we're finding the middle ground here and we're moving forward with these awesome teamwork over here. So I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to make things more favorable for our businesses.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. We will now move on to agenda item number 4, consideration of possible action to approve the first of 2 readings of ordinance 2023-0-30.
I'm going to turn this one over to Joe.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. In your package, you should have received a data sheet that I submitted in regards to this update to this ordinance. Currently, the ordinance is listed as fire alarm systems. We wanted to be able to do a name change because not only does it include fire alarms, it also includes the burglar alarms as well. So we just wanted to get it changed from fire alarm to just alarm systems. So this change is based upon getting us updated to the most current local government code related to the frequency of alarms that we have in a specific preceding 12-month period, as well as the fees that would be associated. I've looked around at other cities in the area, and they are also using this similar model related to this local government code. So if you guys have any questions, I'll feel free to answer those questions.
Thank you, Joe, for that update. Any questions or comments from council? Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Agenda item number 5, consideration and possible action to approve the first of 2 readings of ordinance 2023-0-31.
Now it's Chief's turn.
Good evening again.
I am.
Just a little backstory on this is last spring during the school year, we started receiving complaints down McCoy, Charlotte area of parents or individuals that were parking on the side of McCoy in front of not in front of, north of the junior high and in front of the high school on the east side of the road. Basically what they were doing is they were just stopping, and they were waiting for their children to get out of school, and they would walk to the cars and would get in the cars, and basically they're picking their passengers up on the side of the road to avoid getting in the line in the staging areas like they should be doing. The complaints came out last year. I was probably want to say about February, March. We got with the school district. We worked with them on it. It subsided a little bit, but we still kept having the issues out there. And basically what was happening is the cars were pulling off onto the side of the road into the grassy area during the wet season, and it was rutting up and tearing up the sides of the roads. It's not only that, but it's also a safety concern for the parents, and it's for the children that are actually crossing the street at the high school to get into the parking area. So what we did is we went in and we created under Article 4 of the residential parking, Section 5982, another ordinance, short ordinance, which is defined as parking, stopping, standing, loading, and unloading zones. And it basically just prohibits the stopping, standing, parking, loading, or unloading of passengers in specific areas along specific streets that run adjacent to some of our schools that we have in town. Some of these schools we're not having the problems at, but we are foreseeing a potential problem. So instead of just hitting one area, we are looking at all the areas that are around town, and we are requesting to create an ordinance to give the officer some enforcement actions based off of this ordinance.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that update. Any comments or questions from council? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. We will now move on to agenda item number 6, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding Home Rule Charter, Section 4.02, appointment of members of boards and commissions, and this is something that I requested. If you haven't seen through our city social media that we are now advertising for some of the boards and committees that we formed about 2 or 3 months ago, and I believe, Tammy, that we have some new technology that we're using for that. So I would love to have you highlight that, and then I have a few questions for Dan and some things to present to the body as well, or questions for Bobby, and then to present to the body. So Tammy, can you kind of talk to us about the process and the new software we're using?
So we have a new software called eScribe. What the software does is it's a board management software, so everything filters, it integrates with our website, that everything filters through that software in the way of sending out notifications when terms are fixing to expire, letting us as staff know. Previously, we just did it all through Excel spreadsheets. As those boards have grown and they all have different members on them and they all have different timeframes for when those board expiration times come up, now it's getting a little more difficult to keep up with. So this will send us notices on the staff side to let us know when those terms are up to expire 60 days prior to the expiration, so it gives us plenty of time to advertise for the positions. It sends the incumbent a notification just in case they want to reapply as well. And then it all stores for report purposes with their applications and all that information in the software. So it just gives us another tool to kind of track our boards a little better. Also tracks our vacancies in the way of the meeting night, so if somebody can't attend a meeting or how many meetings they've missed, so it gives us that tracking as well.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Tammy, and I know that it's going to be a big help to you and Alyssa to have that streamlined and leverage some technology there, so that's exciting. Bobby, kind of jumping over to you, can you talk to us a little bit, because we're going to be having some appointments to hopefully be making here in the coming weeks or so, a couple meetings. Can you talk to us just a little bit about the process for how we would go through appointing members and whether or not we can discuss those applicants within executive session? Because I know in the past it was slates were presented, their discussion, it's a little sensitive because you might not want to draw attention to certain things about certain individuals that have applied. So what's the process look like for that, and how can we do it in a respectful manner to the applicants?
Well, I think the process starts at Tammy's end with the applications being received. I know in the past, sometimes it's actually been hard to get people to apply. And a lot of the application been taken to council with just enough to fill the position. So it's almost been what we call like a slate, where council would just vote on the 2 people for the 2 openings, and that was kind of done. And we have had some other ones where there have been multiple applications, maybe more than the things, and council at times has discussed them, and at other times has gone straight to a motion and filled the things with the applications in the packet with 2 names, and there was a motion and a second, and it goes straight there. As far as an executive session, it gets a little more complicated. It actually depends on the board. And the reason is that the Open Meetings Act allows you to meet to discuss employees and public officers. And then it doesn't define what a public officer is. But when you look at AG opinions, public officer is somebody on a board that you have actually given or delegated some sort of governmental authority to. And we do have some of those boards. PD&Z now is a full-fledged thing. You've delegated the platting authority to them. Zoning Board of Adjustment's another big one. Building and Standards Commission, for dilapidated housing, you've delegated them the authority to basically condemn houses, and very extremely powerful board that can assess civil penalties up to $1,000 a day, issue writs to law enforcement officers to evict people from the premises. I mean, it's a very powerful board. And the other one is MEDC, that does all your economic development matters by statute. So you've got at least 4 boards that are given really good delegated authority of the city. A lot of the other boards are what we would call advisory boards, and specifically under the AG opinion, they are not considered public officers, and you cannot talk about those appointments in executive session. So like the Croy Park Advisory Board or the different task force we have, those are basically volunteers. They're advisory committee. They're here to help you, but they're not really delegated any public function to act on your behalf. So that's why it gets a little more complicated, and you have to look at what the boards are. But the big ones we have, yes, you can talk about the appointments in executive session.
Great. Thank you, Bobby, for that clarity. Now, what is the process and the power of council as a whole to remove an appointed member from any given committee, board, or task force?
That also depends on the board. Some boards, because they're created by state law, have got some, conditions put on them. Zoning Board of Adjustment and Building Standards Commission, you remove those for cause upon a written charge, and obviously tendency that goes with a public hearing before there's some sort of discharge of that member. All of the other boards, it's just a majority vote of the council. You actually even have to provide a reason. It's kind of like more of an at-will situation.
Appreciate that. And do we have, and I think this is good for all of our current board members and committee members and also those who are applying to know, do we have a code of conduct and ethics that appointed members are to abide by?
Yes, we do. And in fact, some of the council members that are new have gone over this code of ethics in the city code with them. And it actually appoints to all appointed members and alternate members of all boards, commissions, and committees. So it's our code of ethics that we impose on ourselves, our employees, and all of these board members. So we do have a code of ethics that will, things like bribery and all the conflicts of interest, financial interest, holding other offices, discrimination, even political contributions to city campaigns. There's a lot of different rules of ethics in there. That does cover everybody.
Great, yeah. And I think, and do we go through that training with every appointed board member when they get positioned as well?
Not like we do with council. I mean, obviously, to train every board member would be a bigger task. I mean,
You have so much time on your hands.
I like to spend a lot of time with a council member that's new, especially, and take the time and sometimes even multiple occasions. But I want to make sure they've got the tools they need, and certainly give more attention to the ones that have delegated certain functions, the big boards. We've done orientations and trainings for the whole boards before with Building Standards Commission, Zoning Board of Adjustment, and those boards, but they're done kind of at a meeting as a whole with maybe a little PowerPoint or something like that, not individual one-on-one.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. And then can you talk through, I know that some of these boards and committees maybe have some bylaws and some procedures. So can you just talk through which ones might have bylaws and kind of the process? Because as council, we obviously have our charter, and then we also have council rules and procedures that govern our meetings and responsibilities where we adopt Robert's Rules of Order. But for our boards, committees, task forces, what do they currently have in place?
Well, most do not. PD&Z does have the rules of procedure, which I think are in serious need of updating, because when we switched the meetings from the first and third to the second and fourth and swapped them with council redid its rules of procedure, but PD&Z didn't do theirs. And there's some other things that are outdated, so that's probably something we'll have to give attention to. Building Standards Commission has got bylaws, which pretty much echo what the state law and the city code say. So they're almost kind of redundant. MEDC does, and they're very up to date, actually. They're very good ones. But most of the regular, they're kind of ad hoc committees, they kind of meet however. I think we adopted a rule where if they're advisory, the Open Meetings Act says they don't even have to meet in a formal agenda posted meeting. They can meet at some other place. And I think some of those task force, we've allowed them to do that, even though we could, as a city board, make them adhere to the Open Meetings Act, even if they didn't have to. That's one thing that we've addressed, but typically most of them do not have, bylaws for their organization or their boards.
And thank you, Bobby, for that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this forward, just to kind of have this conversation for clarity's sake. But the bylaws, it is time that we update those PD&Z bylaws, because he even says that PD&Z is to be providing a monthly report to City Council of their activities, things like that aren't being followed. But in my opinion, that's not really necessary. But then for some of the other ones that we're forming, such as the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee and ZBOA and the building standards, it might be beneficial to say, here's what your sequence of events goes for the meeting. Here's what that looks like. And so I would love for council to consider that between now and whenever we appoint those members, one, getting the bylaws for PD&Z up to date, but also seeing if there's a way or any ideas that you have regarding structure for our committees and boards. The other thing is that, we are doing something different and new here at City Hall. We're establishing a new vision. We're building a new culture. And if we feel like any of our appointed members are not buying into that culture and are being roadblocks and fighting against what we're doing here, it's time to see them go. And I don't think that we should be afraid of executing our authority and power to make sure that we have the right people in the right position, following the right process to produce the right product. Because, we have so many great opportunities in front of us, and it's full steam ahead. I would love to see MEDC start to actively recruit businesses. I'd like to see, and I think these workshops with PD&Z, joint workshops, are going to be great. How can we collaborate more and not just operate within our isolation chambers? And I think we need to really look for what are we doing moving forward, and I would love to work with this body on that. So just be thinking about that, kind of, brainstorming a little bit, and let's see what we can come up with here within the next few meetings. But I wanted to just have that conversation. So Bobby, appreciate you preparing for that and answering my questions. Does council have any questions or comments about that? Councilwoman Sarmiento.
I have a statement and then I have a question. I would like to see, and I'm sure council would agree, hopefully, that anybody that applies to any board, if they go online and create online bullying, which happens in middle school and in high school, and I'm starting to notice that it's happening with officials and, the community, I think that should be grounds for you don't get to apply for a board if you're out there doing online bullying, as they call it in the social media world. I think that should automatically disqualify people if they're stirring the pot and attacking, our elected officials and or their own community members. I see a lot of negativity out there. I don't comment on it, but I get screenshots a lot. And I think that if you can't handle and respect people professionally online, then I don't think they should be able to run or ask to be on an appointed board. That's just my statement there. Secondly, my question is, what criteria are we looking at for advisory committees and those applicants? Or if we only get 2, they're basically a shoo-in, or how does that happen? Like, we need to have standards on those very powerful boards that you just mentioned.
Maybe, Tammy, when you get those applications, Tammy, I don't know if you direct them, hey, you're an engineer, maybe you should be on the Building Standards Commission, or hey, you're a planner, maybe you should be on PD&Z. I mean, how do you, or is it just whatever they feel?
When they go online to look at the different boards and what's open, there's a description of each board, but there's also, some boards have certain requirements, and those requirements are listed on there as well. So they know ahead of time, before they apply for something, if it's P&Z, they know they have to attend 2 consecutive meetings. If it's MEDC, they know that they have to live within 10 miles of the city limits. If it's Zoning Board of Adjustments, it's got the descriptions in there that they have to live inside the city limits. Building and standards, we want people with certain skill sets, whether it be engineering or fire marshal or somebody that's got knowledge, a business owner. So each one has some different sets of guidelines. Some are mandatory and some are just specific to the board.
And what I'll add to that, Tammy, is like the Business Advisory Committee within the, I think it was a resolution that we passed to form that, maybe it was an ordinance, but we set certain parameters, like 2 of the members have to be local business owners. 1 person has to be an executive within a business that's considered a part of the Small Business Administration or classified with, so there are certain things that absolutely are there that guide it. But as a council, we need to hold the applicants to certain standards as well. I want to see somebody, personally, I want to see somebody that votes in the local elections. I want to be able to pull up and see that you're an active voter. Things like that, that we as a council can then designate, that aren't necessarily, we collect the information through the application, but it's not like, oh, you haven't voted, you're automatically disqualified. We just can see that information.
Thank you for that clarification. Anybody have, I want to know if anybody is in agreement with my statement about what type of individuals we allow to represent our city and form part of these committees and boards. And the reason I say that is I was very humbled and honored to serve at Manvel High School on their challenge day, which I think was extended to council here. And of the 100 students in there, you'd be surprised how many of them experienced true online bullying. And I'm like, gosh, this sounds like a lot of people in Manvel and in, anytime you're on groups out there. And so to me, that's a huge thing now and something I would love to consider in the future.
Well, I think if the focus is on the conduct, that's one thing. If the focus is on the message, or you disagree with their message and their First Amendment, whatever they're exercising, I think that's when it gets a little stickier. I mean, obviously, if you think that somebody's just being rude, that's entirely different than saying, hey, I didn't like what they were advocating or what they were talking about as far as their First Amendment issue, underlying issue. I think that's the area that should not be taken into account when you're appointing or removing somebody, in my opinion.
And that's a great point, because we do have that right for free speech. But maybe just knowing, like, hey, this person has attacked people. I think there has to be like something that maybe something, I don't know. I'm just looking for a solution for that, you know?
Or if you just simply decided the other candidate was better and not give a reason. Sometimes you're better off by just voting how you vote and choosing the better candidate that you feel is better.
And where I would look at that, Councilwoman Sarmiento, is we want to encourage public discourse and disagreements in person in these meetings and online, and we can all do that in a respectful way. But what we want to look at is, does this person that's applying align with the vision and what we're trying to accomplish here, and what do they fit into the culture of what we're building? Some people will, and some people might not, and we take that on a case-by-case scenario and we make our determination. How was that? Was that good? Did I cover it?
Looking at it.
Yeah, just making sure we're good there, making sure we're good. Well, Council, I appreciate you indulging me in that conversation. What we'll do is we'll wrap up that item, having taken no action or necessarily direction at this time, but something we'll circle back to. Do I have any mayor council comments? Just what I do every time, just want to celebrate our anniversaries for this upcoming month. We have people that have been with the city for at least a year now, and some definitely longer. We have Laura Hernandez, John Thomas, Jessica Rodriguez, Percy, Ben, all celebrating their anniversaries this month. So thank you for being with the city and for all that y'all do for the city. I also want to take a moment, if you guys haven't seen the announcement, our state representative Ed Thompson has announced that he is not running for re-election. So if you see Representative Thompson, just make sure to say thank you to him and to his family for their service to our district. He served on Pearland ISD School Board, Pearland City Council, and he's been serving in the House for 12 years. He is giving his, last State of the State address. That's going to be at next week, I believe, on Tuesday. And one of the things I've always appreciated about Representative Thompson is he hasn't got caught up in the hysteria that you see in Austin, but he's truly focused on constituent service. He makes sure to meet our local needs and pays attention, and his office has always been, at least anytime I've reached out, very responsive to what we need locally. So I just want to publicly thank him for his service and wish him and his family the best in retirement. So with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Don't everybody jump to it at once there, right? All right, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.